Uh, All right, good morning, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the launch of the policy brief on enhancing gender-responsive approaches in the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework, ACRF. We're excited to have you with us today, participants coming from various sectors, as this launching will serve as one of the avenues to offer the creation of policies promoting gender equality and women's empowerment, aligning with efforts to accelerate economic recovery. This event will also be informing the development of the ASEAN Community Vision post-2025 and how to enhance our integration with gender perspectives. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let us officially commence our program with the opening session. We are privileged to have with us today His Excellency Satvinder Singh, the Deputy Secretary General of ASEAN for the ASEAN Economic Community, who will firstly deliver the opening remarks. Following that, Ms. Sarah Nips, Deputy Regional Director of UN Women Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific, will deliver her opening remarks. So first and foremost, we will allow His Excellency Satvinder Singh to deliver their opening remarks, please.
Thank you, and a very good morning to all of you, and very warm greetings from the ASEAN Secretariat in Jakarta. It's really great to be here, though we are all joining virtually, to be here together on the official launch of the policy brief on enhancing a gender-responsive approach in the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework. In short, we call that framework the ACRF framework. Let me start by first appreciating both the Regional Deputy Director of the UN Women, Ms. Sarah Nips, and the organization, the UN Women, for such impactful collaboration in working with us, in helping us to showcase ASEAN's leading practices and lessons learned during the crisis recovery. Now, for this morning, it's my utmost pleasure to first acknowledge the ASEAN decade-long progress as a community, where we have been actively developing, and you know that today it's good for us to be addressing the issues on gender, because we are at this moment actively also developing our ASEAN post-2025 plans, and we are kind of at a pivotal moment to be able to shape our ASEAN's future, to be able to be more inclusive, as well as to be able to address and benefiting all of the people of ASEAN. This policy brief, therefore, represents a significant step in the direction of fostering much more deeper inclusivity within ASEAN. It is also designed to showcase ASEAN's recovery initiatives, particularly those that were focusing on the unprecedented impacts of crisis, notably, of course, the far-reaching effects the last couple of years coming from COVID-19, or even from the climate change environmental disasters that our region have faced, and that it has in return impacted the various segments of society, with, of course, a very specific focus on its disproportionate impact on women and girls. Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the gendered repercussions of COVID-19 pandemic, they have definitely momentarily set back the progress made in the promotion of gender equality and empowerment. We can't deny that. For instance, the significant portion of women have transitioned from employment to undertaking unpaid care and domestic work. That's what we have seen. Furthermore, there's also a persistent gender gap in economic opportunities still remaining, where only 55% of women labor is employed across our ASEAN region compared to over 77% of men employed in ASEAN. That proportion has actually kind of remained stagnant since the onset of the pandemic. On a more positive note, at least 34 million women workers across the region are employed in sectors intricately linked with the global value supply chain activities, including in sectors like garment and electronics manufacturing. Now, these fairly good paying sectors do contribute significantly to reducing working poverty, but they also help enhancing women productivity. Now, recognizing this potential, empowering women, which constitute more than half of our ASEAN population, empowering women still remains really a sustained endeavor for our region. And for sure, moving ahead, these commitments can be further optimized by implementing much more stronger, proper, comprehensive social protection policies, while at the same time, we need to look into provision of much more sufficient investments to enhance women's skills. Now, in terms of prospects, on the more positive note, we are also blessed being in a relatively economically fast-growing economic region where peace and political stability is an envy of many other regions. And our prospects in terms of economic growth over the next decade and beyond looks solid. So we do anticipate much more robust, hopefully stronger recoveries in jobs and growth in the coming years. With this in mind, the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework serves as a consolidated exit strategy from the COVID-19 pandemic, but also building of resiliency to our economy moving forward. And in it, we have actually placed, as rightfully so, due importance to the recovery and the resilience of building of women, not only in short-term recovery, but also, more importantly, to foster resiliency for women to withstand future crises. Over the past 3 years, gender-related initiatives have been implemented under the ACRF to enhance human security, as well as maximizing the benefits of economic integration, as well as facilitating inclusive access to leverage digital transformation. Some noteworthy programs under the ACRF includes the one that I truly personally like, which is the Go Digital ASEAN. That has positively impacted more than 225,000 MSMEs owners and job seekers across the region of ASEAN. And currently it has a focus on women entrepreneurs in the follow-up program. What I'm glad to hear is that majority of the beneficiaries of the program today are women. Now, other initiatives include the ASEAN SME Academy, as well as the ASEAN online platform called Access, which has been there formulated to boost our MSMEs, our entrepreneurs' productivity, as well as knowledge on internationalization. And hopefully this can further support more of our women entrepreneur businesses in the region. Now, more such self-help resources are going to be continued to be developed by the ASEAN team with our strong support coming from both the ASEAN member states and our dialogue partners. I'm glad to see in the coming years, we are also anticipating much more stronger gender focus in many of our practical cooperation areas with many of our country dialogue and sectoral partners, including the work and cooperation that we are having with global institutions. Now, beyond the ASEAN Recovery Framework, gender mainstreaming has also been pursued across the economic sectors of ASEAN under the AEC. For example, the ASEAN Gender and Development Tourism Framework. Another example I can think of is the ASEAN Ministers on Agriculture and Forestry approach to gender mainstreaming in food, agriculture, and forestry sectors, Now, these are just examples developed to ensure that program design in those respective sectors incorporate the specific needs of women who constitute definitely a significant proportion of the workforces in these sectors, both tourism and agriculture and forestry. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, as I've briefly highlighted today, some of the initiatives to mainstream gender across the regional economic agenda, while at the same time helping to showcase clearly that gender issues have become much more cross-cutting. It truly extends beyond the social domain traditionally that we've been looking at. Looking ahead, I want to assure you that at the ASEAN Economic Community pillar, we are actively initiating and supporting and hoping to integrate women agenda into supporting a lot more of inclusive growth so that we are able to actually incorporate and sensitize the needs, the differentiation needs that are required for us to ensure inclusivity and to ensure that we are able to also leverage the strength of our workforces in our region, led by the women workforce, that is critical in ensuring that we can continue to have strong economic recovery and growth for our region in the coming decades. Now, with this in mind, I believe what's really going to help us in the AC naturally is going to be this policy brief. It's a very important document tool that's going to help us to mainstream gender in many of our ASEAN policy making. And we are going to share that actively across all sectors in the AC. And it can definitely serve as a starting point in helping many of us, the stakeholders, to design practical, inclusive policies that are much needed today. Moreover, I think beyond documenting past experiences, I believe this policy brief will also help to lay the foundation for all of us to be able to continue to develop an inclusive, comprehensive, and robust ASEAN post-2025 visioning that I've just mentioned earlier. Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, in closing, I trust that the recommendations outlined in the policy brief will prove extremely invaluable in catalyzing collaborations between the ASEAN member states and all of our external partners, particularly on our focus on integrating women into regional economic policy making and agenda. I look forward to seeing many more meaningful partnerships being cultivated in the coming period for us to pursue gender mainstream policies across our region in the years to come. Once again, big thank you, very big thank you to our partners from the UN for helping us to be able to achieve our goals for gender promotion. Have a very good morning, everyone.
Thank you, His Excellency Satvinder Singh. May we now invite Ms. Sarah Nips from the UN Women to deliver their opening remarks, please.
Thank you so much. Excellency Satvinder Singh, Deputy Secretary General of ASEAN for the ASEAN Economic Community. I'm so sorry, dear colleagues, I started a little too early. Let me begin again. Excellency Satvinder Singh, Deputy Secretary General of ASEAN for the ASEAN Economic Community, ASEAN Secretariat, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to you all. UN Women is really delighted to partner with ASEAN to jointly launch this policy brief to enhance gender-responsive approaches in the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework, or ACRF. This is a very important milestone in UN Women's collaboration with the ASEAN Economic Community pillars to develop this regional policy guidance to support ASEAN and the ASEAN member states to further articulate policy strategies for gender mainstreaming in COVID-19 recovery. The policy brief outlines key strategic approaches to building forward better for a more inclusive and resilient ASEAN community. And it includes some practical guidance for countries to localize and apply these principles in their national contexts. We very much appreciate that in recent years there has been an increasing recognition of gender mainstreaming across all three ASEAN community pillars in addressing key regional challenges, ranging from peace and security to disaster management and recovery and emergency response, inclusive growth, and COVID recovery. We hope that this policy brief will also help to inform the ASEAN Community Vision 2045. As Excellency Satvinder Singh has already mentioned, the COVID-19 pandemic was not only a global health crisis with an unprecedented scale of spillover effects across all the dimensions of our lives. And there was a very notable gendered impact of the pandemic, which placed critical strain on sustainable development and threatened the hard-won progress that has been made on gender equality and human security across the world, including here in Southeast Asia. The pandemic exacerbated existing inequalities between women and men in almost every area of life. In particular, there was an increased burden of unpaid care work placed on women and girls. There was an intensified risk of gender-based violence within households. And there was a loss of livelihood and economic opportunity, which has disproportionately impacted women. So this policy brief helps to make concrete the call for gender mainstreaming in the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework throughout the COVID-19 response and recovery process. UN Women, I want to emphasize, really stands by the ASEAN community to translate this commitment into reality as we move forward. The policy brief also provides some practical tools to mainstream gender throughout the policy cycle, including the use of gender analysis to better understand the different needs of women and men as target groups in policy planning and programming. Also, the development of gender-sensitive monitoring and progress tracking during implementation, comprehensive data collection, and ensuring adequate financial allocation using gender-responsive planning and budgeting tools. In addition, the guidance emphasizes the need to integrate the gender perspective within sustainable recovery efforts in critical areas. These include social protection, as well as the inclusion of gender considerations and addressing gender-based violence in a more integrated manner. Finally, the brief calls for targeted support for women and girls who are in marginalized groups, who are particularly vulnerable to unemployment and economic and livelihood impacts. The policy brief also highlights a number of strategic approaches that are critical for resilient recovery within ASEAN, especially the importance of micro, small, and medium enterprises, which are the backbone of the regional economies. We know that more effort is required to target women entrepreneurs and women-owned MSMEs to ensure that women and men have more equitable opportunities to participate in economic and livelihood opportunities as the region moves towards long-term recovery. I want to emphasize that what is good for gender equality is good for everyone. By placing gender and human rights considerations at the heart of COVID-19 response and recovery planning, ASEAN governments can ensure that their respective nations are well positioned on the path to a more inclusive and resilient recovery. And in closing, dear colleagues, I want to take our recommendations away simply from the realm of documents and really make the connection to another thing that we have going on at the moment. Because the policy brief places considerable emphasis on strategies to mitigate the risks of gender-based violence during crisis. And today's launch of the publication does coincide with the global 16 Days of Activism Against Gender-Based Violence campaign. So I would like to take this opportunity to invite Excellencies, distinguished guests, and all participants in the region to join together with us in raising awareness and prioritizing measures to address gender-based violence, so that together ASEAN is able to build a resilient future for all. Thank you so much once again. I look forward to our continuing collaboration, and for this morning, I look forward so much to hear the insights from all of the distinguished speakers who will be with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, His Excellency Satvinder Singh and Ms. Arnips for the insightful welcoming remarks. Now we will have a short promotion video for our attendees to watch. Can I please ask the media team to display the promotion video, please? Thank you. All right, thank you so much. May we now have a photo session? Let us capture this moment with a quick photo session. Can I please ask the media team to prepare the screen? Thank you. All right. Under the ASEAN Secretariat's count, we will have the photo session in 1, 2, 3. Prepare your best smiles, please. All right, one more time. In 1, 2, 3. Thank you so much, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, moving forward, we will have Dr. Ahmad Zafarullah Abdul Jalil, the Director of ASEAN Integration Monitoring Directorate, who will provide an overview of the policy brief. Director Zafar, please, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Carissa. A very good morning to everybody joining this important session. So allow me to extend appreciations to the UN Women for the good collaborations and partnership in promoting the gender mainstreaming in regional economic agenda in ASEAN. And I would also like to emphasize that this launch of this policy brief come timely as ASEAN is currently envisioning to design a more inclusive future post-2025 agenda, including under the economic pillar. So therefore, past experiences on how we recover from crisis will be crucial for this endeavor. So for this session, I will be providing an overview of the policy brief. And then after this, I think we will have a subsequent a panel moderated session. And we look forward for the active participations from all the participants during this panel session. Next slide, please. I think DSG has already highlighted this earlier during his opening remark on the impacts of COVID-19 pandemic, particularly on women, on the issues of employment, for example, given the fact that women are mostly being employed in unpaid care work as well as in services sector. And since 2020, women participations in the labor force has declined slightly to 54%. Compared to 56% in 2019. But then if you were to compare this to men labor force participation is still relatively lower. Men, for example, their labor force participation stand at more than 75% in 2020. However, I'm pleased to share that there's some steady improvement that has been taken place with the projected marginal increase of women labor force to 55% in 2024. And then if you look at gender gap index in terms of women participations in economic activities as well as opportunities that are available to women across ASEAN, it remains stagnant since the outset of the pandemic. And then this means that more efforts may be required to be channeled in order for us to enable women to have better access to economic participations and as well as opportunities. In response to this, ASEAN has put in place several gender-related policies during the COVID-19 pandemic. I think DSG has mentioned some of these measures that has been introduced. And majority of these measures were channeled towards mainstreaming gender-sensitive measures in the existing ASEAN policies. And then we also have quite a number of measures that are channeled toward addressing violence against women. However, notwithstanding all this important and commendable progress, commitment can also be made to expand a number of policy measures in order for us to build women economic security, as well as support unpaid care work where women labor are heavily concentrated. So next slide, please. I will not. I will just be brief on this slide, just to share with you a little bit on the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework, which was adopted in 2020 during the 37 ASEAN Summit. It is a whole of community exit strategy for ASEAN from the pandemic. So you have 4 broad strategy, as you can see from this slide. And then there are also a number of enabling factors that have been identified in order for us to ensure effective implementations of this strategy. Next slide, please. Now allow me to share with you a little bit more on some of the key gender-related initiatives under this ACRF. So in the next following 2 slides, we'll provide you with all some of these initiatives. So one important initiative is the leaders' declarations. One is on the protections of migrant workers and family members in crisis situation, and the other one is on the placement and protections of migrant fishers. So these 2 initiatives serve as an impetus for to showcase our leaders' commitment to translate tangible actions in the areas of protections of migrant workers, where women oftentimes are disproportionately affected by harmful practices. So in addition, ASEAN has also adopted several outlooks, reports, toolkits, as well as guidelines across different sectors in ASEAN. And all this showcase the efforts that have been made by ASEAN in order to incorporate gender dimensions in our commitments towards regional integration. So allow me to share some of these guidelines. One is the ASEAN Gender Outlook. So this gender outlook call for more investment tailored to gender disaggregated data. So the objective is to help achieve sustainable development goals. And then we also have the gender mainstreaming in human resource toolkits. Again, the objective is, one is to serve as a guide for assessing gender mainstreaming initiative, to identify gender-based learning needs, monitor the implementations of the initiative or intervention to be developed to address specific areas for enhancement in gender mainstreaming initiative, and also finally to align standard in human resource across all the AMS in ASEAN with various global and regional requirements that promotes human rights and gender equality. Another important guideline that has been introduced is the ASEAN Guideline on Gender Mainstreaming into labor and employment policies toward decent work for all. There are 4 focus areas that are being targeted under this guideline, namely on employment promotion, decent working condition, social and maternity protections, and finally on international labor migration. And finally, I would also like to highlight a report that has been launched, which is the ASEAN State of Climate Change Report. It provides an overall outlook of the state of play of climate change in issues in ASEAN, but at the same time, it also takes into account gender and vulnerable group as the stakeholders that need to be addressed during the adaptation strategies against this climate change. Next slide, please. So in addition to this, the initiative that I mentioned earlier, ASEAN also acknowledged the importance of empowering women, which would require resolute efforts to enhance their skills. And I believe the DSG has also mentioned this initiative earlier. One is on ASEAN SME Academy, and the other one is Go Digital ASEAN. So all these 2 initiatives has been launched to partly play a role in equipping women-owned MSMEs and other women community with digital skills. Next slide, please. So now I would like to share a little bit more on the tools and gender mainstreaming that has been highlighted in this policy review. And there are 5 areas that need to be prioritized to effectively stop gender issues for its mainstreaming on inclusive growth, equal employment, social protection, food security, social infrastructure, and public services. So allow me to just briefly go through each of these 5 issues. One is on inclusive growth. So there's a need for us to pursue and acknowledge women contribution in economic sectors, such as agriculture, informal sectors, and unpaid care work. And then it is also important for us to acknowledge and value these sectors that yield tangible economic benefits to women. Second, women also need to be provided with access and opportunities for high skill employment, so that ultimately it will be enhancing the livelihood and the quality of women livelihoods. And third, on life cycle social safety net and social protections. So this is also important as it serves as a significant measures to protect women from further vulnerabilities. So therefore, there is a need for public and private funds to be invested for social protection programs. Fourth, on the rights to quality nutrition food security, especially in rural areas, which is oftentimes still prioritizes men against women, particularly when it comes to crisis situations. So there's a significant proportions of women who are working in agriculture sector, and then this make them as one of the backbones to guarantee food security. So therefore, we need a comprehensive policies that will facilitate women access to the right nutrition and also social protection program. And finally, on social infrastructure and public services. So these are the backbone in order for us to provide equitable access to women, particularly those living in vulnerable areas. And therefore, we need adequate investment to be channeled to public infrastructure that takes into account women needs, and this need to be prioritized in gender mainstreaming approaches. Next slide, please. In the policy brief documents, there are 3 policy approaches to gender mainstreaming that have been identified. One is on gender responsive policy. Second is on gender neutral policy. And the third one is on gender blind policy. So mainstreaming gender responsive policy is key for sustainability of AEC initiative for all communities, including women. And then it is also important for us to implement gender neutral policy and gender blind policy, which respectively assume assume that affect both sexes equally, as well as provide limited recognition to the roles of different gender in specific social, cultural, economic, and political contexts may not be relevant for women needs. Therefore, it is important for us to pursue gender responsive policy that is well-fitting, as it attempts to understand gender roles, needs, and systemic inequality, while at the same time encourage equal participations and distributions of resources, opportunities, and benefits. At the same time, it is also important to highlight the fact that gender mainstreaming will also require engendering, monitoring, and evaluation framework. And this can be done by first understanding the needs of target groups, setting goals in public policy, determining ways of working, and finally, continuous monitoring for robust policy making. So allow me to elaborate a little bit more on the gender mainstreaming tools. So as you can see from the slides, four tools that there are four tools that the policy brief outlines to facilitate gender mainstreaming. So these include gender analysis, gender sensitive indicators, gender responsive budgeting, as well as gender responsive M&E system. So the importance of each tool to support the gender mainstreaming in policy making is as follows. First, for gender analysis, it is important for us to examine the differences between gender roles and how this affects the constraints and opportunities to men and women. And in the case of gender sensitive indicators, so we need this to support the aforementioned exercise on gender analysis, and these indicators need to be determined in smart manner, meaning they have to be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. And then on gender responsive budgeting system, so we need this to be designed by assessing how the use of national budget in crisis response measures can effectively address its impact to women. And finally, on the gender responsive M&E system, it is important for us to have this where gender disaggregated targets are being set and tracked to adjust and evaluate the crisis response as necessary. So all these four tools can be useful through the inclusions of gender-related issues to the national budget statements related to recovery framework, as well as productions of regular reports which inform how the planned crisis responses policies reach women and support the promotions of gender equality. So finally, on how we want to move forward after this. So I think there are three crucial preconditions that we need to emphasize to ensure gender mainstreaming. All the efforts that we make in terms of gender mainstreaming would come into fruitions. One is while attention to gender has gained appetite in the past few years, the know-how for practical implementations of gender mainstreaming remain alien to a lot of people. So in this regard, it is important for us to introduce the concept and know-how across all levels of national governments and other institutions to facilitate possible adaptation as deemed necessary. Second, it is important to acknowledge that not all women are the same. So we cannot have one size fits all policy to implement gender mainstreaming. So targeted and contextual measurement should be designed to extend beyond gender disaggregated dimension, but at the same time, it needs to take into account spatial, the divide between rural and urban areas, as well as age group differences amongst women. And finally, it is also pivotal for us to cultivate and rejuvenate partnership between government, private sector, CSOs, and knowledge partners in order for us to advance gender mainstreaming implementations. So with that, I conclude my overview of the policy brief, and I hope that the launching of this policy brief will be invaluable not only for the participants that are joining online today, but can also be amplified as necessary across all your network in order for us to pursue a more comprehensive and inclusive gender mainstreaming. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Zafar, for the comprehensive overview of the policy brief. Now, before jumping to the moderated session, we have prepared already a Mentimeter for all of our attendees to start fresh. So can I ask the media team to share the Mentimeter link and QR code, please? All right. We are going to give around 1 minute for all participants to scan the QR code and join our Mentimeter. We will reflect several points that have already been delivered by DSG, also Sarah Nips and Director Zafar in the previous remarks, as well as your perspectives on gender mainstreaming. Sorry, media team, can we go to the previous slide? I think several attendees might need more time to scan the QR code. Okay, I think that is enough. Let us begin the Mentimeter. I think most of the participants has already scanned the QR code. Media team, can we start with the first question, please? Okay, for the first question, what do you think are the policy priorities for ASEAN to foster gender equality to build resilient recovery beyond the COVID-19 pandemic? We'll give some time for participants to vote. Oh, interesting. The first ranking is still policy support for women entrepreneurs, especially MSMEs. And then followed by, okay, just change. Promote inclusive digitalization for gender equality. All right. Thank you so much. Okay, moving on to the next question, please. Please identify the most relevant as a starting point for ASEAN to incorporate gender mainstreaming tool in its economic planning. Okay. 12 have voted, all of the above should be okay. Interesting. I think all of the options, most of the attendants have voted that all of the above should be implemented in parallel. That is nice. Okay, moving on to the third question, please. Which gender-related issues do you personally identify with and you believe should be a priority for governments to address in the coming decades? This will be also useful for us to develop the AEC post-2025 agenda. Gender pay gap, occupational segregation. Okay. Underrepresentation in leadership roles is the most voted so far, followed by limited access to education and skills training. Okay. These are very interesting insights. Moving on to the fourth question, please. Moving on to the next question, please. Media team. Okay. Which elements do you believe will facilitate the gender mainstreaming in ASEAN economic policies in post-2025 environment? Okay, action-oriented, sustainable, enterprising, adaptable. Nobody is voting nimble or enterprising. Okay. Okay, 13 people voted action-oriented. And then the rest voted for sustainable and inclusive and adaptable. Interesting insights. Moving on to I think, is this the last question? I believe this is the last question, yeah. Okay, thank you so much, all ladies and gentlemen who have participated in this Mentimeter. We will now start the moderated panel, who will be moderated by Ms. Mesa Silakarma, the Senior Project Officer of the AEC Post-2025 Unit. And this panel will be enriched by 3 esteemed panelists. The first one is Ms. Annette Baleda, Chief of Policy Development and Advocacy Division, Philippines Commission on Women. Second one is Dr. Kanchana, the Director of Sectoral Development Directorate, ASEAN Economic Community Department. And last but not least, Ms. Maria Holzberg, Humanitarian Disaster Risk Reduction Climate Portfolio Lead and COVID-19 Coordinator for UN Women Regional Office for ASEAN and the Pacific. Okay, without further ado, I will allow Ms. Mesa to take the screen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carissa. Thank you very much, all participants that joining us today. So as mentioned with the SG Satvinder this morning and also Ms. Sarah Nips and comprehensive presentation from Dear Zafar, there are several toolkits that are already identified under our policy brief. And without further ado, I would like to invite our first panelist to the screen, Ms. Annette Baleda from the ACW Philippines. So if I may present on the screen.
Hi, good morning. I'm trying to open my video, but it's not working. It says unable to start video.
Okay, that's all right, Miss Annette. So we just wanted to probably while we are waiting for the presentation. Okay, that's great. Thank you. Whilst we are waiting for the video to for the presentation also to start, just wanted to greet you and thank you for your time to participate in our panel discussion today. As you probably already read and also examined the policy brief, there are several toolkits like gender analysis and then on the responsive budgeting, also gender sensitive indicators that already outlined as part of the crisis recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. So probably the questions that we would like to explore this morning with you, since you are the ACW who actually has an elm of leadership in the ASEAN Gender Mainstreaming Strategic Framework on 2021-2025. So if Ms. Annette can give us a little description and a brief backgrounder and on how these recommendations can inform the ASEAN Gender Mainstreaming Strategic Framework implementation, so the participants can connect the link between the recommendations to build long-term recovery and also the framework that we already have in the region. So over to you, Ms. Annette. Thank you very much.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Good morning, colleagues. I thank you for this opportunity to do a presentation to respond to the question on how the recommendations from the policy brief could contribute to the implementation of the ASEAN Gender Mainstreaming Strategic Framework. So as we may all know, during a course of disasters such as the COVID-19 pandemic, women are disproportionately impacted, such as in terms of economic and job losses, to increased caregiving responsibilities, vulnerability to gender-based violence and safety concerns, and even mental health challenges, among others. And ensuring that the gender lens is integrated in our recovery efforts provide us with the opportunities to address these inequalities with inclusive policies and decision-making tailored fit for those who are most vulnerable. So to respond to the question, let me first share some of the specific PCW's recovery efforts and initiatives as the national machinery on gender equality and women's empowerment, hoping that this would also, we could learn something from this in terms of using the framework towards gender equality and women's empowerment. So in the PCW, when COVID-19 struck, we facilitated the issuance of gender-responsive policies, starting with the issuance of a policy to allow national government agencies to recalibrate or adjust their gender and development plans and budgets, and to enable them to address gender gaps and practical and strategic gender needs of women. We also updated our national plan for women, called the Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment Plan, to respond to the challenges faced by women and girls brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic. So according to the 2022 National Demographic and Health Survey, approximately 17.5% of women aged 15 to 19 years old have experienced either or a combination of physical, emotional, or sexual abuse from their intimate partners. Next slide, please. Following the mobility restrictions and lockdowns, next slide, please. The UN Women mentioned that there was an increased incidence of partner violence as observed, and as individuals were confined indoors. Moreover, during the pandemic, women's unpaid care and domestic work, next slide please, significantly increased as a result of more people staying at home with the lockdowns. And women took on additional responsibilities in caregiving, household chores, supporting family members. And this rise in unpaid care and domestic work impacted their ability to participate in paid work, education, and other activities in their homes. The 2021 National Rapid Household Care Survey conducted by Oxfam Filipinas in collaboration with the Philippine Commission on Women and UN Women presented daily allocation on care work between women and men, and how the impact of COVID-19 has varied it significantly. The report showed that women spend up to 13 hours a day on unpaid care and domestic work, while men only spend 8 hours on average. It also showed that women dominated in all types of care activities. Just to illustrate, because the study was really important to be able to collect information at the planning stage. This is clearly stated in the recovery framework, the policy brief presented, that data are important even at the planning stage to do evidence-based gender analysis on the impact of the pandemic on unpaid care work done by women and men. Up until now, the Philippines has been actively promoting post-pandemic recovery efforts, focusing on ensuring gender-responsive strategies through policy development, advocacy, capacity building, monitoring, evaluation, in enhancing the health system as recommended in the recovery framework. Health system, provision of social protection, promoting financial security and economic integration, among others. Now, as the vision lead for gender mainstreaming of the ACW work plan, the Philippines, particularly ACW PH, will support efforts towards the integration of gender perspectives across sectors and levels within ASEAN and even ASEAN member states. So our commitment in the Philippines to the ACW work plan, specifically, we will lead the conduct of the training needs assessment to be able to facilitate the drafting of the training module for the regional workshop on gender mainstreaming among ASEAN Gender Mainstreaming Committee members and other sectoral bodies. So these efforts such as this are essential as they lay the groundwork for fostering a more inclusive and equitable approach within the ASEAN framework. By leading this assessment and creating a targeted training module, ACW Philippines aims to empower these committees to drive impactful gender mainstreaming initiatives at the ASEAN region. So the picture shows some of the past initiatives are related to the ASEAN gender mainstreaming framework. We are also dedicated to actualizing local or our national implementation of the ASEAN gender mainstreaming framework. So in response to the questions, we're saying that it is also important at the member state level, at the country level, to really actualize or not just leave the framework in paper, but really do something and take action to implement the recovery framework and plan. So to achieve this, a concerted effort are necessary to, like as what we have been doing, introducing and disseminating information on the ASEAN Gender Mainstreaming Strategic Framework among the Philippines' focal points across the three integral community pillars of ASEAN: security and political community, the economic community, and the socio-cultural community. So the aim is to gain support and commitment from these focal points and encourage them to become gender champions within the respective committees. I think that's a very important aspect, gaining buy-ins and support before we can really implement this recovery framework. And then, slide 7, please. Recognizing the importance of nurturing the commitment, ACW Philippines has also structured plans to facilitate this process. But of course, we need the help of everybody. It's not possible with us doing this alone. Although we have planned a series of comprehensive capacity building sessions, specifically tailored for the focal representatives of the three pillars, and we plan to design the training and provide the necessary tools, knowledge, and strategies that are essential for integrating gender perspective effectively within their committee responsibilities. And then ACW Philippines also targets to equip the focal points with the knowledge and understanding required to champion gender mainstreaming initiatives within their spheres of influence, thereby fostering a more inclusive and equitable environment within the ASEAN framework. It is important not to assume that everyone knows about gender. It is important to assume that there is a need to really level off everyone's understanding and gain their support to really be able to understand how gender mainstreaming could help push forward our agenda on gender mainstreaming, gender equality and women's empowerment. So further, I may just also share that existing policies, there are already existing policies which exist not just at the ASEAN but at the AMS level, and these are really important. It is important to understand that there are already existing policies which we could tweak and maybe improve on or enhance to enable us to integrate the gender perspective and consider what has been recommended in the recovery framework. Like, for example, in the Philippines, it is very fortunate and useful that the Philippines has an existing gender-responsive, comprehensive framework for managing gender disaster risks, which even predates the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. And what sets this framework apart is its early integration of gender considerations within its legal structures. And this proactive stance showcases the dedication of the numerous stakeholders involved in disaster risk reduction initiatives within the country. So learning from this experience, it's also important that the existing recovery framework recommendations also takes a look at the existing policies, no, at the especially at the ASEAN AMS, the member state party level, and also even at the ASEAN level. So, like, for example, the deliberate inclusion of gender perspectives in the legal frameworks governing disaster risk management reflects a commitment to ensure an inclusive approach to handling these risks. It also underscores the recognition that vulnerabilities and responses to disasters are not uniform across genders. By embedding gender considerations early on, it will demonstrate the proactive efforts to address the diverse needs and vulnerabilities of all members of society, especially in pandemic and disaster risk management strategies. So I think that's quite long, but in conclusion, it's really crucial to emphasize the profound significance of inclusive recovery strategies as being recommended in the recovery framework in the policy brief presented earlier. The inclusive recovery strategies that earnestly integrate gender perspectives. The integration of gender considerations in recovery efforts stands as a testament to our commitment to genuine inclusivity and equity. It's not just about recognizing differences, it's also about acknowledging the diverse needs, the roles, the experiences of every individual within our communities. So as we navigate the post-pandemic landscape, let us, we hope that we will all commit ourselves to the recovery framework and ensuring that we all help in its implementation plan, implementing the framework that embodies the principles of equality, fairness, human rights, a framework that propels us toward a more prosperous and inclusive ASEAN community for not just for us, but for the generations to come. Thank you so much. Over to you. Sorry, I think that was a very comprehensive response to your question.
Thank you very much, Ms. Annette. It's really good to hear not only regional level experience, but how Philippines handling also in terms of gender mainstreaming in their policies. You also mentioned the importance about how that the recovery is now moved to long-term recovery. So we need to take into account climate change and then the impact of disasters, and also how Philippines already approach this on the national level by socializing this with focal points across the three pillars. So thank you very much, Ms. Annette. That's very comprehensive, and that's, I believe that it enriches the knowledge and insight also for the participants. We will come back to you during the question and answer session, and we will save the best questions for the last. But now we are moving to our second panelist. It's very pleasing today because all of our panelists are actually women. I just realized. And next to me, already here is Director Kancana Manchikorn. She is the Director of Sectoral Development Directorate in ASEAN Economic Community Department in ASEAN Secretariat. So thank you very much, dear Kancana, for taking the time to discuss with us this morning. I believe you already saw some of the mentioned initiatives and key highlights in other areas, and then also in Philippines. But for this session, I wanted to kind of delve because in AEC, we have several sectors, right? There are tourism, and then there are also foods, and also there are some efforts to narrow development gap. And we certainly knew that actually women are heavily employed here, and also even a lot of activities concentrated in this sector. So probably good also for participants to know what ASEAN has been doing in these spaces in the last year. So Dir Kancana, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to congratulate the team and also together working with UN Women in this policy brief, and also the enhancing gender responsive approach, right? I think it's come at the right timing as we are now planning for the new ASEAN community vision and the related strategic plans, right? We will have at least 4 strategic plan on economic, community, socio-cultural, and also political and security, plus on connectivity. So I think the gender lens can be applied to all this planning. And I think what we have heard since the starting of today seminar is it's quite a clear policy, you know, that gender equality should be one of the aspect that would need to mainstream in ASEAN. And actually, I personally would like to see this as a journey. You know, if you look back, I think we're making good progress in terms of promoting gender equality. We see more women leaders, women entrepreneurs, successful women in the region. So I think it's now moving forward with this framework. I really like the 4 aspects, you know, that has put forth. I think it would be a good instrument to raise awareness. You know, people would get informed, and it's not just the women, it's the men too, right? You know, once they get informed, they are aware, right? The next step, which is very important, is, you know, how we get them engaged. And engagement can be at different levels, right? If they participate in the activities, supporting us in decision making, that's one level. But more importantly, we want them to act, right? So I guess the next step after we have this this guideline, this manual, this guiding principle approach is we have to build an enabler or, you know, even an enabling ecosystem, you know, so that we can translate this policy into action. You know, coming from like policy and planning background, I guess you just never know how you success until you can measure it, right? So I really support the ideas of, you know, we really have to have a good indicators, know how to monitor, how to evaluate, because, you know, that way it could complete the loop. So setting a measurable goals is very important. So I think getting back to your question is you want me to highlight some of the example that what we have done, right? Actually, there's a number of activities, even without this, you know, framework. Yes, there are many activities that's going on in promoting gender equality, in particular empowering women, you know, in of the sectoral work. For example, DSG Sadvinder has mentioned for the food and agriculture, you know, sector, we do have this guideline. You know, the Minister of Food and Agriculture and Forestry have endorsed this guideline in promoting women participation, and in particular gender equality in the food sector. As you may all know that women are quite more than half of the workforce, you know, in agriculture sector. So with that guideline, I'll just highlight a few that it starts from like ensuring equal participation of women and men at all levels, and policy making, doing capacity building activity, participation in all national and regional activities, ensuring that the data collections, you know, because data is very important in planning and also monitoring, right? Incorporate the gender aspect in the data collection, you know, at day one in the design of the collection, so that it would help in terms of monitoring and evaluation. Also, provide opportunity for women access to the resources, in particular financial resources, and also encourage women to all this capacity building program, in particular education, and this also linked with other things that we do in education sector and science technology sector as well, that making sure that women have opportunities, in particular participating in STEM area, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. That's the data show that there's more men. But now I think it's statistics getting better. We see more women in science. Also, women leadership, training, and also making sure that this concept is coordinated across, all other sectoral bodies. So that's what I think one tangible kind of framework that has been endorsed and tasked for food and agriculture. And with that framework has been adopted and endorsed, all the projects, most of the projects under food and agriculture would incorporate this gender equality aspect, when we decide the project implementation. Another sector that's quite active in promoting gender equality, in particular women participation, is in science and technology. There's a number of programs, in particular, for the whole pipeline. I think making sure that we have a good supply of girls and women, in the workforce is very important, because it's a starting point, right, into their careers, and in the future will becoming women leaders. So, for example, in science and technology, we do have a number of policy paper, policy recommendation, gender mainstreaming in STI. We also have this capacity building program, Women in STEM webinar, series of webinar. It's a good opportunity that the women would share thoughts, and mentoring each other. Sometimes, it's just like building confidence, sharing experience with women, so that they build confidence in moving forward. So we do have Women in STEM webinar. We also have a platform to enhance mobility of scientists and researchers, in particular for women. We also working with the US. We have Women Science Prize for women, to acknowledge the success, in particular women in this region. We have many successful women scientists, young researchers as well every year. And they are very smart, they have so many patents, and their research impact many aspects, not just the economic part, but also in health and social aspect as well. We have also not just the US, but so India. We also have a program on women exchange of women, mobility program of scientists and researchers as well. So that's some of the example. In IAI, which is a program that particularly look at narrowing gaps, among different groups, also countries in the region. We did incorporate the indicators on women gender equality in the project appraisal. So each project proposal or application need to have a pre-assessment of the impact of your activities or policy on gender equality, in particular on women. So that are some of the example that I can highlight. But one thing just want to share with you that now we are in the process of translating policy into action, right? And Director Shafar has mentioned that there's no one-size-fits-all policy. So just want to highlight that this is exactly what we experience in sectoral planning and action. Like I mentioned, in food and agriculture, we have a number of women, right, in particularly unskilled laborers. Already women participating in the sector, right? But how do we making sure that they have access to resources that they could grow their careers, they have could make impact. But there are other sectors, right? Transport, in particular maritime transport. We have just a few women in the workforce, only 2% actually, in particular in marine transport. So so the policy intervention would be different, right? We need to really promoting that, okay, this is opportunity for you, and also the workplace, it has to be more friendly to the women, special program. Actually, in the maritime transport, they did have just recently this year in May, we do have a dedicated session for women. It's a International Day for Women in Maritime, you know, just to raise awareness that there are good job opportunity for women in this sector, you know, and you can now see that we have more pilot women, right? So so those are some of the example. So I would like to end here with this once again going back to measurable goals. I think one positive sign that we see that now the policy also look at impact, you know, social, in particular social impact, and statistics has shown that the women social enterprise, you know, if you have social enterprise is another form of enterprise, and majorities of the owner or the leader, there are more women than men. And this social enterprise platform has claimed that, you know, it would have delivers more social impact, you know, both in social impact and also economic impact. So I think this could be one area. It's a good sign. It's a good hope that, you know, we're not just looking at economic impact but social impact. And just last thing that I want to highlight is this information sharing. In particular, I've seen at national level, many countries have programs that support women, particularly promoting gender equality. I think what we could do at the region is to put together perhaps like a website or some kind of a database access, so that, you know, they know what kind of support that they have, you know, and also the incentive for women. So that's all for me for the first round. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear Kanchana, for a very comprehensive briefing. I actually like the 3 points that you mentioned. The first one, actually, there's no one size fits all, which emphasizes dear Zafar's point before. And then there are different policy interventions. For example, for women in science, it will be different policy approaches compared to those who work in a kind of still low-skilled sectors. And then there are the emphasis on the impact of women-owned social enterprises. So I just wanted to share that we had this business communities engagement on 18 September. And some of the enterprises or businesses who came for this engagement to develop the next post-2025 vision, also owned by women. And we can see how the women's perspectives actually being taken into account, and they kind of like also pursue for more inclusive growth moving forward. So by then we can say that the future is bright, because there are also a number of women now active in science, like dear Kanchana already said, and also there is a shift to emphasize more on the impact. So not only the number, but also the impact of the programs. So that's a very great point from dear Kanchana. We will go back to dear Kanchana with some of the questions on the screen, but we will move first to our third panelist from the UN Women, Ms. Maria Holzberg. So Ms. Maria Holzberg, may I ask you to turn on your screen? Hi, good morning.
Good morning. Beautiful to see you all. And I am so delighted and honored to be next to such accomplished and excellent panelists. It is a true pleasure. So just wanted to say I'm coming from UN Women's Regional Office. And as mentioned, I served as the COVID coordinator, which is potentially the origin story of the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework. But I am not here as one person. We, UN Women has a strong team that looks at many different gender dimensions when it comes to recovery from pandemics or disasters. And so I'm actually sitting here on behalf of people much smarter than myself. But your question is, how about the sort of priorities to support ASEAN in integrating gender into the economic recovery and inclusive growth? And I wanted just to recall the point by the Secretary General who talked about the mom. I really appreciated, as he said, momentarily setback. So we were on progress, and then with the COVID pandemic, it did set us back. And Sarah Nibbs mentioned that in her opening remarks. Having said that, ASEAN has been remarkable at as fast as possible finding the mechanisms to ensure a gender just recovery package. And this has been advanced in many of the ASEAN member states who are the flag bearers. So I will talk about our priorities, but I wanted to just also mention that what the other points that I think are important, how UN Women wants to serve and support the ASEAN recovery framework, so actual application. And I want to highlight the point about being action-oriented. We saw that in the Mentimeter. We want to talk about sustainable, and sustainable means that you use these type of recovery frameworks, this ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework, as your guiding tool, which will enhance the sustainability, and you want it to be inclusive. These are the points that I saw from the Mentimeter, and that will be the pillar of the type of support that UN Women would like to advance. We see, and we're well aware, that women's economic empowerment is a key element of the framework. We think, and this is where we commit, that more efforts are required to promote a cross-sectoral collaboration between the women sectoral bodies of ASEAN and the sectoral bodies under the ASEAN Economic Community pillar. So with this group, those linkages we see will be beneficial in advancing a gender responsive approach. We are absolutely delighted to advance and elevate a partnership with AEC and find different ways, so potential ways to integrate the gender perspectives into the ASEAN Community Vision 2045. And this is particularly, we are committing and we want to support the next AEC blueprint. We have a very strong women's economic empowerment team working both within the ASEAN member states, but also on the regional level, that we would like to offer as support in order to advance the partnership for the AEC blueprint. So, you know that we have been a long-standing partner of the ASEAN Community on Women, ACW. And we've also been part of the ASEAN Commission for Promotion and Protection of the Rights of Women and Children, ACWC, over this past decade. And this is us being in this room together is a testament to that decade-long engagement in core sectoral bodies and in core spaces. Since 2019, we supported both ACW and ACWC to elevate the institutional mandate. So the mandate of the ACW and ACWC and enhance gender mainstreaming across the 3 ASEAN community pillars. So that links, and I apologize for so many acronyms, but I know you speak them too. That includes the work that we have advanced on the ASEAN regional framework on protection, gender, and inclusion, which brought ACDM, ACW together with ACW and SOMSWAD. And I will speak a little bit later about the criticality of having the regional framework on protection, gender, and inclusion in a minute. But the focus here is looking at, well, what will be our priorities? We have always valued, and this is, I believe, we have demonstrated this value, a consultative approach to our partnership with ASEAN. For us, it's absolutely important that our technical knowledge and technical input on economic recovery, disaster response, and recovery, addressing violence against women and girls, are all embedded in the work of ASEAN member states and serving in support of the ASEAN Secretariat. So for us, we are always, you're asking about our priorities. Our priorities are always to respond to national and regional demand. And the most important piece of this, and it needs to be underscored, is we want to ensure, and the way we work is always to advance ownership of ASEAN and ASEAN member states in driving this agenda. We have seen this as a critical component that us as gender technical experts are here to help ASEAN and ASEAN member states to think through some of the elements needed for ensuring gender transformative approaches. We do not think that just because we're experts, we know everything. And expertise does not mean anything without the specific understanding of the context and the needs from the people in the region. And this has been how we've advanced on all of the different support mechanisms that we've done. I'd also like to just stress some of the linkages between disaster management and emergency response, which is where for a lot of the countries in globally, but also in ASEAN member states, were the entry point to responding to the pandemic, and has shaped some of the thinking when we talk about economic recovery from the pandemic. From our observation, more efforts are required to promote inclusive and equal opportunities of women and men to ensure resilience and sustainable development of the ASEAN region. Meaning, we're hoping that this can be integrated into the new AEC blueprint. We would want this to be part of the community vision of 2045. On economic empowerment and participation, where our very strong team of women's economic empowerment experts and working on entrepreneurship skills, as also referenced by the Secretary General, we've been working very closely on developing policy guidance tools that we hope to leverage and make sure will be part of the point we all agreed we want to be action oriented. So we're expecting to use the policy briefs as the entry point to make sure that the action can happen within countries. So last year, you may recall, ASEAN and UN Women launched the ASEAN Regional Policy Brief on gender and business reporting to accelerate the implementation of women economic empowerment principles. And this in part of advancing an inclusive COVID-19 economic recovery, tying to the point that the Secretary General made about than momentarily halting the development and progression. So the brief that I'm referencing now, and there's been many briefs communicated in this session, speaks to the priority of the ASEAN Economic Community pillar to have stronger engagement with the private sector to promote economic recovery and opportunities for women entrepreneurs and MSMEs in the region. So from our side, when we look at women's economic empowerment, we see that the private sector is a critical entry point to advance this. UN Women has also supported ASEAN in the development of the Women's Entrepreneurship Declaration, which was made at the ASEAN Women's Leaders Summit in Cambodia last year. And this particular declaration put a spotlight on women's entrepreneurship and their potential contribution to an inclusive recovery in ASEAN. Within this, we also see the multiple opportunities in advancing entrepreneurship to take forward climate resilient livelihood. So we are actually advancing programs in target ASEAN member states where we link the women entrepreneurs in disaster-prone and climate-sensitive areas to accessing finances through development banks within the countries. So we're basically working to unlock finance to make sure that women entrepreneurs are being given an opportunity to build their own climate-resilient societies. In terms of forward looking, and I will soon be done with the intervention, UN Women is very much looking forward to collaborating with ASEAN in 2024 and beyond. We want to put these different policy guidance tools, as mentioned. Many of them were mentioned by Secretary General. We also had an excellent presentation to share some of the outlooks. We want to put them into practice to support both ASEAN and their member states to implement the recommendations that can have real impact on the lives of women and girls. This includes developing and advancing a comprehensive work plan to take forward gender equality in the workplace. We want to take this forward in the marketplace to incentivize the private sector companies. And we want all of this to be done to measure and report progress towards gender equalities and the sustainable development goals in the region. All these conversations are currently underway. There's been a preliminary consultation with ACW and an initial conversation with ASEAN Secretariat AEC to co-design programs that can leverage the women's economic empowerment principles in engagement with private sector companies. We want to look at enhancing a greater focus to integrate gender into trade policies through gender responsive procurement mechanisms, and to advance innovative approaches to care entrepreneurship or women's entrepreneurship in climate and renewable technologies in ASEAN. So these are 4 examples that I want to share, which we are committing to and we want to advance. One of them being, and just to repeat, women's entrepreneurship in climate and renewable energy, meaning unlocking finance. We want to continue working on care entrepreneurship because in economic recovery spaces, one of the barriers, and in disasters, one of the barriers is the high cost of unpaid care work in terms of ability for the workforce to take action. We want to advance gender responsive procurement, meaning the procurement and procurement mechanisms of countries look at gender responsive measures and looking at how our trade policies can look. We also just wanted to close on that one of the key elements that is critical here, and I said I would come back to it, is the importance of looking at these frameworks as a guiding tool. So within I mentioned earlier the gender protection and inclusion framework, which sits under the disaster management mechanism and the ADMIR work program. This includes 27 targets to take forward, to measure and to hold ourselves accountable for advancing protection, which includes addressing prevention and response to gender-based violence, gender, which includes looking at data, gender, women's leadership, and inclusion, which means we want to advance an intersectional approach. So making sure that women living with disabilities and other marginalized groups are also integrated. Using ASEAN has this particular framework on protection, gender, and inclusion has 27 targets. That is more targets than in any global framework on this on disaster response. So what we see is that ASEAN is actually not only regional leaders, but also global leaders in building frameworks that include gender responsive mechanisms. What is lacking, which we've all discussed, is making sure the applicability in countries. So to close, let's work towards being action-oriented. Let's work towards being sustainable and inclusive in taking forward the gender responsive approach into the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework. So I want to thank you. I think this has been an absolute pleasure to be with you all, and I thank you so much for giving the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Ms. Maria, for a very comprehensive description on how we can move forward on the key priorities to gender mainstream. I like your point in terms of how we need to move forward as action-oriented and sustainable, and also all of the potential priorities in disaster and then climate resilience and also gender sensitive procurement, which is very essential and the basic to move forward with the long-term policies to ensure that women are being taken into account even since the planning stage and the process. So I think we have heard very comprehensive and different angle of policies and priorities from different panel in terms of how to gender mainstream. So probably we may want to hear from the participants joining online. If you have any questions to our distinguished panelists here, we can entertain 1 to 3 questions, I think, given the timing. So anyone in the virtual room wanted to pose some questions? Okay, whilst waiting, I'm gonna, because I have Dear Kanchana next to me, and then I would probably just have a follow-up question on some of the points that Dear Kanchana mentioned. It's really good that we see the initiatives across all of the sectoral in AEC. But what do you think would be the most pressing in terms of catalyzing all the new initiatives that can be cross-cutting with the ones in the already mentioned by the UN Women also in the socio-cultural side? So how can we kind of like nurture more collaboration, and for in your opinion, which sectors that would need more collaboration with the socio-cultural as well to kind of ensure gender mainstreaming moving forward?
Well, I think the keywords that we hear is implementation. right? And sustainable. Okay. So the most pressing issue is now is, you know, how, like I mentioned in the first round, is how do we convert all these ideas into implementation? And definitely you need resources, you know, you need people, you need the money, you need the funding, and more importantly, you need that it has to be sustainable. So you need the whole ecosystem. And I think Madame Maria Hosberg has mentioned very important keyword is engaging the private sector. You know, I think that's cross-cutting. You know, ASEAN, perhaps working with UN Women, we can work together in terms of, you know, engaging the like-minded, particular private sector, international organization, or even the community or the you know, entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs, women leader, you know, to work together and to the supporting this. I think what we could do, they have a number of successful pilot program, you know, and with good evaluation. And I think we can also learn from a number of good like women program of the UN. How do we scale that, you know, from the pilot, you know, so that it would have more impact. Scale from a small project in one country into more regional program. We have a number of program, like I mentioned, on um, agriculture program, right? It's one of the program is changing this agriculture practice using chemical for more bio-based, you know, more organic, like safer, you know, food safety and all that, right? And we engaging women, and we found out that women are real game changer. You know, they are the very important change agent, very successful change agent. You know, how to extract that the lesson learned, you know, and scale it up. So first thing is how do we scale out a successful pilot into more larger, you know, impactful. And second, we have this lesson learned, you know, we trying to we see the gaps in the system. For example, some, you know, we have to look at the whole supply chain or value chain. I'm sorry, I'm using like economic word, right? But you really have to make sure that you have, if there are gaps in the system, you fill up the gaps. You might need some certain policy intervention. For example, like I mentioned, the transport sector, right? There's job opportunities in logistics, right? There's opportunity for women, so special capacity building program, you know, to support them, but also making sure that the new feeder, the inflow, like I mentioned, this STEM workforce, you know, more women into the system. I think that's all like a medium to long term. That how do we synchronize all this sectoral work, you know, cross-cutting work. So you need someone to really look at the big pictures of, okay, there's a we mentioned the Deputy Secretary Satvinder has mentioned opportunity in digital economy, you know, sustainable economy, climate change area, and all that, right? How do we make sure that the new feeder, the stream of women, you know, making sure that gender equality, everybody have equal opportunities for this future opportunity of jobs, you know. So that's sort of like a quick win and medium to long term, you know, plan that I think we need like a good coordination. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear Kanchana. That's a very good point as well that you just highlighted, particularly about how to make all of this cross-sectoral work and then how to learn from the women experience in the agricultural sector, how they can make a game-changing kind of like initiatives in terms of gender promotion. And then you also mentioned that that's important as well to have like a sustainable kind of approach in of our approach in the gender mainstreaming. So I think from the points that made by dear Kanchana, I wanted to probably ask Miss Annette in the Philippines experience, because we saw that there are like several points made on the climate resilience in the Philippines case, and also on how then there was like an impact from the COVID-19 pandemics exacerbated by the crisis. And then there was like also a linkage actually from the points that made by Dear Kanchana and also the presentation that presented by Ms. Annette as well, to kind of like course gender mainstreaming in the future on moving forward. Especially there is a potential future where we see more aging population in the region. So that one case is also will see like a growing care domestic and all those. So in Philippines experience at ACW, how can we kind of also like take into account this potential emerging megatrends in the aging population? So we can kind of also take into account gender lens to have like a better and comprehensive policies to address this potential megatrends in aging population, because we know that I think few years from now, few decades from now, we will see a lot of our population growing more senior, and then probably we need more productive. But how to kind of like ensure the inclusive community? So probably offer to you, Ms. Annette, if you have, if ACW Philippines have any experience also in terms of preparing for the aging population also in gender mainstreaming, that would be great as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. The Philippines has already also taken a look at our population, and we said because our total fertility rate has been decreasing, and we said that after some time, I think Philippines will have an aging population. But I think they said that's quite far from now. Maybe not in our lifetime, but because of the trend, we're saying that could happen if the trend will continue. And related to your question on the aging population, we are happy to inform participants that the Philippines has actually just established or created the Department of Senior Citizens. These are people aged 60 and over, and it just shows a very empowered elderly population in the Philippines. In that regard, because the department is new, the Philippines, the ACW Philippines, led by the Philippine Commission on Women, is also actually working closely with the Department of Senior Citizens in terms of also looking at the specific needs of women elderly population, because we said that to be effective, our plans policy should be inclusive, participatory. That's why in our conduct of policy, because that's the mandate of the Philippine Commission on Women, when we do policy development, advocacy, and even developing our plans, we ensure that stakeholders are really consulted to be able to reflect really their needs. I mean, be able to be informed of their needs and be able to formulate policies and programs that would specifically address their specific gender needs. So in connection with COVID recovery, it is also important that we also have existing mechanisms where all the stakeholders meet together. We have the NDRRMC, National Disaster Risk Management Committee, composed of various stakeholders. And we meet, I mean, OECD, who is leading the convening of the committee, ensures that members of the committees are able to report to the committee their respective initiatives and even also consult the Philippine Commission on Women in terms of how to really ensure integration of gender perspectives in the policies, plans, and programs of member agencies in the NDRRMC. So just to summarize, I think the quick response to your question is that consulting, ensuring the participation of the targeted beneficiaries to our policies are really important to enable us to come up with the most appropriate interventions to address their issues and concerns. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Annette. That's very important to have like proper targeted beneficiaries so we can tailor adequate policies for these population groups. We have one question on the chat box. So there's a question on how are the linkages between women's economic empowerment and the climate resilience in the COVID-19 recovery. So if the panelists can share if there are any emerging lessons learned where ASEAN may need to focus on in the coming years, essentially in the potential linkages between economic empowerment and climate resilience. Probably because we already heard from Dirkan Chana and Ms. Annette, probably Ms. Maria can provide the response to this question from the participants. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Would be also lovely to hear from others as well. But I mean, from the perspective of looking at what is economic empowerment and then what is overlaid with what the reality is for us all. We've gone through the COVID-19 pandemic collectively, but that is not the end to the shocks and the hazards that our systems are experiencing, meaning we need to prepare for a much more climate resilient approach. If we know that women are usually engaged in quite climate sensitive livelihood, meaning they have the agricultural, they work in the type of agricultural interventions that if a cyclone comes or if a prolonged drought or floods occur, their agricultural practices are more vulnerable, usually are more vulnerable. So in order for us to be able to withstand and scale so that we are ready for the climate emergency events, which means we need to adapt. So we in the climate space, we talk about adaptation and mitigation. So we want to mitigate the shocks, but we also need to adapt to the climate emergency. In order to do so, we need to identify the more climate resilient technologies and practices in order to protect the livelihood of those that are most vulnerable. And the reason we need to protect those livelihoods is that if they lose their livelihood, it will put an additional stressor on the social protection mechanism that's being advanced in the country, in that country and in that space. You want to reduce the number of times communities need to go to evacuation centers. You want to reduce which means we have to build homes that can withstand the type of storms that now occur across all ASEAN member states. You want to be able to ensure that as soon as a disaster has happened, as soon as the flooding has occurred or there's a cyclone, that as soon as possible, the community is able to quickly scale back up, enhance their own recovery, because you don't want to put that burden on the relief operations, which are usually run by government. So in order to do that, we need to invest in the ways that women, in UN Women's perspective, but women and marginalized groups, those that are most vulnerable, to be able to advance using the type of climate resilient technologies. And one of the things that UN Women is advancing is the use of renewable energy or low carbon technologies. So we have concrete examples from Vietnam or Cambodia, where women have developed their own businesses using solar pump or solar mechanisms for drying goods, and slowly built a business that has then been expanded. So for the example I'm thinking of, a woman she has now established a collective, a cooperative, meaning more women in her community are actually part of her business. It's small scale. We're not talking about big money. We're talking about very small, but that whole community is more resilient when a climate emergency will happen in that community. That's one example. You want to then elevate this to look at SMEs, to look at enterprises, and make sure that they operate also on using climate resilient technologies to enhance their ability to continue their operations during climate emergencies. We actually want to not even talk about emergencies. We want to make sure that as part of economic recovery, it is already embedded in how the private sector and districts are taking forward their plans. So these are some of the perspectives to share about the sort of linkage between climate entrepreneurship, but also climate programming, using, for instance, the ASEAN Comprehensive Framework as its core pivot point and guidance to move forward. Thank you for such a good question, whoever asked it.
May I just add something?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes,
just
yes, you may.
to respond also to the question. It's really I mean, given the post, I mean, COVID-19 pandemic recovery stage, we have noticed that more women are entering the digital economy. I mean, selling their products online, using the digital platform to be able to earn and contribute to women's economic empowerment. So I think it's really also very important, asked by Rice, the women's economic empowerment. One of the things that we could look into is capacitating women who are into entering the digital economy or using the digital platform in order for them to gain economically and enable them to also contribute to the economy. So right now we are looking into the Philippines in partnership with some APEC partners. We are in the process of formulating guidelines, first to capacity building for these women who are into the digital platform, and then of course the policies that could help them in terms of setting standard fees for them, because even online some of them have been what do you call this, exploited, given only a very low pay because they're women compared to the men. Those have been some of the issues that were raised. And of course, to ensure that they will be protected in terms of, because at present, we don't have yet specific policies protecting specific issues related to discriminatory practices in the digital economy. So something for us, Rice, to think about. Thank you for your question.
Thank you, Ms. Maria and Dr. Annette, for sharing with us a very comprehensive response. Actually, the response that Dr. Annette, Ms. Annette just gave actually already answered the question that we just received to the Mentimeter, on the digital ones. So I would probably move now to the one question from one organization from Yogyakarta. Probably this would be our last question if there is no other question, because we are kind of like running out of time. But I saw that Ms. Zubaida actually raised hand. So if you can unmute yourself, and then you can actually post your question to the panel, to the three panelists here, it would be appreciated. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yes, can you please speak louder?
Okay. Okay, everyone, can you hear my voice?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I'm Zubaida Romawati. I'm from Nakiatul IPS of Jakarta, Indonesia, one of the young women organization under the Muhammadiyah, the biggest organization in Indonesia. This organization also fights the gender equality, especially in education and other fields. So my question is about Indonesian condition, which is that have potential for natural disaster. Every year there is always disaster agenda actually. The experience of natural disaster especially in Yogyakarta, after that is a lot. If even is occur in every year, maybe 4 years, but mental health problem also increases, especially during the pandemic. I want to discuss whether maybe UN Women has a program to mitigate or increase resilience to disaster, such as psychosocial assessment activities and others. So maybe it's possibility to us to improving because we want to build resiliency after the disaster, like to prevent mental health problem in our city. And the second one, for the sake of organization sustainability, we just developed our research center. To all projects need to be researched to determine the impact of each of our programs, and we still, and also our organization still have problem with a very strong patriarchal culture in Yogyakarta, because in Yogyakarta we still have a strong patriarchal culture, and that's also so we can move this also our issue, and we need to some support to make this organization more impactful to improve and also empower women in Yogyakarta. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Zubaida. So to summarize, the first point that Ms. Zubaida wants to know is if there is any UN Women program on the activities that can support assessment on the natural disasters. And the second one is more on the side how to kind of like respond to the organizational sustainability to kind of make sure that they are having impact amidst the culture in Yogyakarta particularly. Because of the limited time that we have, I would pose the first question to you, Anuman, and then for the second question, I would like to hear very short answer both from Ms. Annette and also Dear Kanchana. Then we can proceed to the closing. So probably we can go to Ms. Maria first for the first question. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much. And maybe I would thank you for the question. And I would please recommend if we could put onto the chat the email of myself and my colleague Nataporn, who can take forward a conversation. But just for everyone's information, yes, there are core and critical tools that UN Women and partners, so we never work in isolation, have established in order to be at the outset of a disaster. We can in our assessments, we know which type of questions to ask at the outset, and we are happy to share those type of products. Many governments also have established quite robust policies, but again, the issue sits with what the applicability in the implementation. So I would like to say that we can definitely share those type of tools to advances. When we talk specifically about addressing mental health challenges, and that is one of the things that the sector, I will say, has just recently, in the past maybe 5 years, started thinking more about, because we note that the gender challenges are exacerbated in disaster, but the shocks and stresses and the impact on mental health was not made visible and highlighted until during the COVID pandemic, when it became very, very clear what the mental health challenges were. And we would be in position to share some of that. There are a lot of partners that work on psychosocial programming. In terms of conducting assessments, I'm not familiar if there's any particular ones that would look specifically at some of the psychosocial issues on an individual level. However, when we talk about assessment, we would ask so that we get a broad understanding of the psychosocial challenges. But I don't think that disaster management and response agencies are likely to be equipped to ask this type of questions from an individual without doing harm, because we need to be very careful when we talk about ending violence against women, gender-based violence, as well as mental health challenges, that those who are asking the questions are doing it in a do no harm approach. But in terms of having psychosocial programming as part of response, that is definitely something that exists, and we're happy to share. I'm going to be quiet now because I think we're soon out of time.
Thanks, Ms. Maria. So I'm gonna go to second question. Very short answer from Ms. Annette and then dear Kanchana, probably. This is a question more on how to thrive for the organizational sustainability amidst the cultural barriers. Thank you.
Yes, I think that's a very close from home question because we also experience such. But related to the question, if the projects programs need to be assessed, of course, yes, they need to be assessed, evaluated to inform the implementers, the program implementers, if indeed the objectives and outcomes of the projects have been met, and also determine the lessons learned when we implemented the program. So I think there are challenges in terms of, as most of us have experienced this, there are various challenges in implementing programs, especially related to gender and development. But of course, there are already existing tools as already recommended by the recovery framework as presented earlier. We could utilize the practical tools that they have suggested in order to mainstream gender throughout the policy agenda. Once you find out what went wrong or what went well in when you implemented the programs, then of course you could replicate the good things, and of course try to ensure not to do again the issues which hindered the attainment of the goals or targets. So I think I will stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So over to you, dear Kanchana. Okay, my short comments on the second questions is talk, have a lot of dialogue. I think if we have the same goals, if we share the same goals, you know, it's just overcoming all this process, right? I think we need to tune that we are trying to reach the same goals, and then we discuss on, you know, how can we work together, right? And also have some partners, strategic partners to work with you. Okay, on the second part of the question, but for the first part on this assessment impact, right? I think I can understand if you not have the right methodology, the right tools, it might sound look very difficult for you, but I think that you could seek help. There are many organizations, local universities, or even like our team in ASEAN, perhaps we could provide some. I think this is good that we see that there's a challenge in this impact assessment, right? In particular, what's the impact of having women, gender equality, right? So I think seek help to support you, and also have a good dialogue with all these people to overcome the culture challenges. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear Kachana. That's a very good point on kind of like pursuing our common and collective goals to kind of push forward these barriers, and how to connect with all relevant partners to kind of still ensure the sustainability of the gender program. We can also provide the contact from our relevant divisions in ASEAN here on the gender side, so your organization probably can be benefited by connected with them. So I think that's all from today launching of the policy brief on enhancing gender responsive approach, particularly on the panel discussion. So I would like to thank all the three panelists, probably give virtual applause to the very good discussion today for all the panelists, for Ms. Annette, and then also Ms. Maria and dear Kanchana here. Probably we can stay for 3 minutes to have a short photo session, a short virtual photo session to commemorate the panel discussion. Probably under my count. The organizer is ready? Okay, so 1, 2, 3, give your best smile. One more time, 1, 2, 3. Okay, great. Thank you very much for the time. So we are in the end of our session of the launching. We really hope that our policy brief will be invaluable, not only for the participants, but also for the ASEAN policymakers, especially that we aim to be more inclusive in our post-2025 planning. We will share the policy brief document to the emails that you already registered, and also if there's any point or anything in mind to how push collaboration in this regard, you can shout our email and also to the UN Women partners here. So thank you very much for today. We hope this is invaluable for you, and have a good lunch. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. As we have now approached the conclusion of our event, on behalf of the ASEAN Secretariat and the UN Women, allow me to extend our sincere appreciation. And thank you once again for your meaningful participation, and looking forward to seeing you in the next events. Have a good day, everyone.